Autosave podcast, episode 2. My name is Michael from Sydney Retro, and of course, I am joined by Joey, who is the Chief Stepladder Repairman. Welcome, Joey.
Thank you.
And today, Joey, I thought we could talk about Pokemon. It's definitely a huge icon in gaming, not just in gaming, as multimedia franchise, and a little bit around the history and sort of how it was designed and where it's going in the future, or where we think it's going in the future. What do you think?
I think it's a good idea.
Fantastic, because that was your suggestion. So
that's probably why.
So okay, let's I guess start from the beginning with what was your first Pokemon game and why were you originally interested in the franchise?
Sure. I originally heard about it, I think, from Computer and Video Games in a little article on games from Japan, and they talked about a new Nintendo game called Pocket Monsters, and which I think was the name of the time in Japan, and that listed out looked interesting. Just a kind of a Dragon Questy monster type collection game. Then when the marketing for it started to come out ahead of time, it was mostly focused on the things other than the game, the cartoon, the merchandise, eventually movies and stuff. And then when the game released, it already had an expectation of people wanting the product. And while I remember some people were disappointed that the actual game itself didn't match the vibe of the media surrounding it, it certainly caught on and extended the life of the Game Boy many years after they initially planned to stop making it.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, there was re-releases of different versions of things, and generation up till Generation 3 could be played on the Game Boy Color. Am I right about that? No, it's Generation 3 Game Boy Advance maybe. Anyway, important thing, yes, it definitely extended the life of the Game Boy, but also the Game Boy Advance and then into the DS and 3DS. Well, I think without Pokemon, those systems would have struggled to get off the ground. I know the 3DS did a little bit already, but even more so, I think, without a Pokemon to help sell the system. Those.
I don't know about that. It definitely helped, but the DS was I think until the Wii was the most, and the PlayStation 2, the most high-selling device of all time. It was like 121 million units or something. Like, it was insane. I don't think it was built on Pokemon. Pokemon did very well, but it was already a multi-million seller long before Pokemon was on the system.
Yeah.
But it had backwards compatibility for Game Boy Advance.
Yes. But I think it wasn't until the price dropped originally for the DS, and then the DSi came out.
The DS Lite, I think, was
the
first
DS
one.
Lite. Yeah, sorry, DS Lite. You're right. That really helped. Anyway, I digress.
It's all connected.
It is all connected, and you're right. I think one of the things that we've all wanted from Pokemon game in the past was to kind of follow the show, Ash's journey and that kind of stuff, particularly with Gen 1. I think that expectation is gone now. Obviously, the region of the Pokemon game that we have matches whatever the cartoon is doing. But I think, we all as kids wanted to have Ash's journey. And Pokemon Yellow kind of gave us a little bit of that, but not fully.
Sort of.
There was a ROM hack, I think, a while ago, actually, that basically just had that just like replicated that Ash's journey, which is
it's pretty
cool.
Good. Yeah.
I played it. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, look, my first game was actually Pokemon Gold. My brother got silver, I got gold, and
the West version.
What? What are you talking about?
I'm joking. They're basically the same.
Well, yeah, they're always the same.
No, they're not. Red and blue, very different in a lot of ways. There are glitches in blue that aren't in red.
Yes, but largely, I mean, the plot and stuff is identical. So, basically.
Yes, plot. Pokemon's most famous attribute.
One thing about Pokemon that I did want to discuss later, just on that plot stuff, is the amount of dialogue that is in a Pokemon game nowadays versus like even Red and Blue, which was for their time pretty dialogue heavy, I would say. You watch the speedrunners and they just mash the A button to get through the text as quickly as possible. And I think we all do it. And I don't know why they don't just like cut down on that a little bit and simplify the story, because the story is always some like, oh no, there's some calamity that's happening from an evil organization, and you, a 10-year-old, needs to stop them whilst also collecting all the gym badges and becoming the world champion for some reason. And I know some of the newer games have like played with that formula a little bit, but it's not necessarily too dissimilar. And I wonder in the future, like if they need to depart from that to really recapture like the older audience. Because I think like, with COVID and stuff, there was a massive refocus on Pokemon, mainly with Pokemon cards as collectibles, as people were looking for something to do while still being in our homes. But to re-engage that audience to potentially want to play a new Pokemon game on an 85-inch TV on the new Nintendo Switch or the next Switch that comes out, like, do they need to come up with something else that allows people to kind of engage with the media in a new way?
Well, the short answer would be no. The Pokemon companies made it pretty clear they make pretty much all the money by doing exactly what they're doing, and that's always the biggest concern for them, is to make certain they're increasing their profits year on year. But in terms of, as you say, about engagement, this product was never really made for anyone other than children. The fact that adults played is because they played it when they were children, or at least young adults. And them engaging with it doesn't matter as much because there's always new kids.
Yeah.
And they'll always replace, and every Pokemon game will be someone's first Pokemon game. And that experience, I think, is, at least from the games I've played over the years, they just want to have that same experience, just with a fresh coat of paint and maybe, recoloring of some of the monsters.
So is that why I have to sit through like 2 hours of shit tutorials every time I play a Pokemon game? It's like, this is how you catch a Pokemon. And I'm like, I fucking know. Like, I'm very aware of that. You throw ball at item. Like, it's not hard.
In that sense, it is very well designed because they know exactly that it will always be someone's first time, and they don't really care that it's someone's 20th time.
Would they?
Because they know that 20th time person is still going to play it.
I know, but would it kill them to put in a button that's just like, hey, have you played Pokemon before? And then you hit yes, and it goes, cool, we'll skip all that stuff, and you can start here. Or even on, like, if you want to do a second playthrough of the game, like, have an ability to, like, start in the first town with just your starter Pokemon that you pick, and skipping like first 3 hours.
If you want to be rational, yes, I think they'd be fine. But from what the Pokemon company's done over the years, I wouldn't always call their decisions rational. Like, they, in some cases, have left money on the table in a sense that they could have made a lot of games for the audience as they were growing up, but they never really consider that as part of the thing. The closest I'd say you get is Pokemon Go, which is definitely kind of an all ages kind of activity where especially families will go out and catch Pokemon together in the field or something. Whereas the actual traditional monster collecting RPG style games, they are, I think, a product unto themselves. I mean, Arceus was, I think, the most radical in terms of how it differentiated itself from other games.
They're doing another one of those.
They are, yes.
Yeah.
And rumors are they might do a remake of Arceus as well for Switch 2.
I hope so, because that game chugged on the Switch.
Yeah. There are rumors. I don't know how accurate they are.
Which is surprising because it still looked like a swampy ass. Like, it didn't look great.
I did not put much time into it because I couldn't stand the frame rate. But I care more about frame rate now than I used to. If I was a kid though, it wouldn't have bothered me. I would have just done it for the experience.
Do you remember like when you were a kid and you'd played some games and had like 15 FPS and we just didn't know any better?
Yeah, I mean, by the time you were a kid, that was different. But by the time that was happening, I was well aware. Because the late 90s for 3D games, I mean, that's a whole topic unto itself. But yeah, the frame rate was treated very differently back then, and in fact, it was probably higher priority as well compared to the way things happened in the early 2000s, where it became less and less an issue, more focused on like 20 or 30 FPS for games. A lot of PlayStation 2 games didn't run above 30,
Yeah. Actually,
sometimes below 30.
an interesting thing maybe to talk about is the upcoming court case or the legal issue. I don't know how much you've read up on it
Yeah,
between
it's
Power
interesting.
World, Pocket Pair, and Nintendo obviously going after them for recently filed patents that are then they're going to try and like act retrospectively, which, as far as I'm aware, in Japanese court is fine to do.
Yeah, Japan doesn't work like the rest of the world in a lot of ways.
But isn't that
They're
like, very generally speaking here, not to get into specifics, but they don't necessarily have the same innocent till proven guilty thing. It's more like prove your innocence versus the accusations kind of
pretty
system,
much.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they have it's a variation of the inquisitorial court system, and but they go for, instead of innocent until proven guilty, guilty until proven innocent. So it's very very hard. That's in a criminal case. In civil cases, it is similar to how other places in the world do it, but again, it is a heavy emphasis on the person who's bringing forth a case rather than the person defending a case.
Yeah.
And especially specifically in the Power World thing, Power World did expanded on the Pokemon formula and saw great success for doing so. But it copied directly a lot of things from Pokemon. Sometimes the monster designs themselves, like it's not something you could pretend didn't happen.
Agreed on the monster designs, but I don't think that they were able to go after them for that specifically because
no, they didn't.
Yeah.
No, they went. The Pokemon Company. The reason why they took so long, I suspect, is because they went for specific patents that were things that were unambiguous and not directly connected to the game mechanics. Although one of them was the game mechanics about capturing things inside balls, so that's going to be interesting.
But it was a very general thing where it was like throwing a ball at something to capture it, and I was like, well,
yeah,
that's
it's very vaguely worded, but it really only applies to Japan. But
yeah,
if it does succeed in Japan, they will have to change it worldwide, because they won't want to support two different versions of the game, I suspect.
Yeah.
But actually, and again, this also ties into how Pokemon has changed and how it's also stayed the same. If the Pokemon Company themselves, as I was mentioning earlier, had done more with the setting and the mechanics of the setting, Power World would not have existed at all. There would have been no reason for it. But the developers of that game saw an opening where we have all these players who've grown up with Pokemon and know there is more that can be done with the mechanics of this setting, and then they expanded on it, whereas the Pokemon Company haven't. And there are reasons for why they should and shouldn't have done that. There are like still a lot of ethical issues about how the world of Pokemon actually works. N was right in a lot of ways.
100%. Everything, everything, yeah, 100%. Because you look at it and go like, well, I don't know, they're forced to fight for our amusement, like, to settle squabbles and dealings by making them fight each other, and we capture them in balls against their wills. And if you ever watch like the anime, none of them want to be captured. Like they're not like. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Is you might fail and they escape the ball. They try to actively go like, no, I don't want this. And then they have the Stockholm
syndrome. She famously doesn't want to go in his ball.
Yeah, exactly. So it is but I think that's the thing in the Pokemon games, right? Is if you speak to any of the NPCs in there, an alarming amount of them will be like, how Pokemon are so great and love the fact that they do the things and live in harmony with the people and all the stuff and the things. And that's basically most of the NPC dialogue, just to reassure people that it's all okay.
No, my favorite is the Pokedex entries that talk about how ruthless the Pokemon world actually is.
Some of those are intense, huh? Like, what was it? Cubone is wearing the helmet or the skull of his dead mother.
Yeah.
And I was like, how many of them? So do they just become Marowak, die, and then their helmets just... How does that work?
I mean, obviously they don't go into the mechanics of it, but Just the fact that that's the flavor text for that Pokemon. And not just that, like how they eat each other or how
Yeah.
they just sometimes murder each other for fun. There's like they don't use those words, but that's what they're doing. Um,
I think,
there's I think one for Persian that is basically like how Persian kills for fun.
yeah. Um, let's have a look. I think there was one for Bayonet, which was insane, but I don't remember what it was. I'll try and look it up while we're talking here. Um, but yeah, some of the ones are really, really interesting. Like, what are they here? Pokedex entries. So,
Yeah, the Pokedex entries I think make the world more interesting. They give hints to the wider scope of things, and that's what the games have failed to deliver on, in my
well,
view.
that's what I would love for them to expand on is that kind of stuff and to have more complex Pokemon, stuff that requires you to make ethical choices. But I mean, that's really us as an adult wanting something more from that world. Engage with
Yeah.
not just, cute little Pokemon, but with, well, what does that actually mean for the world? And how does it affect everything around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the issue why they don't do that because they don't want to have to deal with those things. Because there's no good way to talk about animal exploitation, right? And especially because Pokemon are basically sapient. Like they understand word language. They can understand complex and abstract things.
Mm,
Mewtwo is basically a person. Like there's no way you can say, and like some of the Pokemon are considered gods. There's no way you can pretend that they're not an active and participant in the world in a sense of an agent. Like they know what they're doing. They're not just acting out of instinct. Although, again, in the early games, that was more the case. But as the shows and the multimedia stuff have broadened that world a little bit, it has made them more than just animals.
yeah. Well, yes, they definitely needed to. Actually, the Pokemon Company did feel like animated shorts a while back that was actually quite a bit more grown up. And the
Yeah, the 3D
Pokemon,
stuff, right?
I don't know if it was 3D, but it was little small touches that just made it feel a little bit more grown up. Where, like, I think one of the Pokemon was either Growlithe or Arcanine, and like the Pokemon doesn't say its name anymore. Like it just acts like a vicious like police
Tiger
dog
Dog? Yeah.
kind of yeah, and it just feels a little bit more. And I really liked those. It was years ago now, that's why I don't remember it very well. But I really liked those when they came out. I wanted to see something more of that potentially in like a Pokemon anime, more of an adult setting. And I think that's why Power World has done well because it's not perfect. I played the game quite a bit, and I mean at its core, it's a survival resource gathering game. You just use pocket monster adjacent, legally distinct, well, not legally distinct enough apparently, but distinct enough versions to be able to achieve that stuff, which is a very interesting take. It wouldn't necessarily be my first go to for the genre. So it's not without its own issues and that kind of stuff, but there are elements of it that when you engage with its world feel kind of nice. There's poachers that have them in cages that you can go rescue, and then you take them for yourself and go work on your own base. Obviously, you
I
can
mean,
engage
Force
with them.
Slaver and monsters with machine guns, I think will always be popular.
Oh, I hope so. It's either that or that
There's
new Excel spreadsheet game that's coming out. So yeah,
I'm very much looking forward to that. That is in my wheelhouse in a variety of ways. Yeah, I mean, again, I have a deep appreciation for the Pokemon series, but I've not been able to get. Sword and Shield was the last one I put any time into, and I got bored. It wasn't, even though the mechanics were fine, and the presentation was fine. It was just I wasn't getting anything out of it anymore that I hadn't gotten before. In fact, better in previous games.
well, yeah, and there's so many games to play nowadays. Like, do I want to play this, which is just a new version of a game that I already have played that's slightly worse, or do I play something else? That's always
Yeah,
the
and that's
question.
and that's why they don't need to do anything for us. They always have a new audience or the same audience who will just buy their products and play it. And I think really the reason why I suggested this topic is because the Pokemon TCG game came out for phones recently,
Right.
and I gave it a go, and it's fine. It's the simplified version of the card game. I've never really been a big enjoyer of the TCG because I've always felt it was kind of simplistic, even with the more modern variants having a bit more to it. Um, but if you really think about it, the games are only a small part, or maybe not a small part, but like are not the major part of what that company is now. The Pokemon Company is specifically the Pokemon Company. It is
Mm.
everything. So, and that's why I suspect the way the culture reacts to and adopts from things from the Pokemon media, multimedia in general, is not only the more interesting thing about how we consume media, but also where I think it is maintains its strength more than anything else. Because all the games, they could stop making games right now and only have the existing products, and they would still be a successful company.
Yeah, absolutely. For the next 30 years, they could re-release cards, special editions. They could remake games on new consoles or re-release them. They merchandise alone. Like if you go to the Pokemon centers in Japan, they're fun to walk through for sure. But I think the first time I was there, I bought a lot more than each time I've gone back. I don't buy anything in there anymore because there's only so many overpriced. Well, then not so overpriced, but only so many.
Disappointed.
Yeah, there's only so many Pokemon plushies and pens and chopsticks and like stuff that you can buy, before you kind of get a bit tired of it. But they don't necessarily need to change that because, like you said, there's always new people that are engaging with the brand, and because they're getting new young people through the door that haven't had that experience yet, they're always just going to have the same size customer base that's going to engage with their franchise regardless of what they do, which I actually think is a bit of a shame because I would love to see some innovation, particularly within the video game franchise.
They was it last year they really released or remade Diamond and Pearl, wasn't it?
They did, but it actually wasn't done by the Pokemon Company, which is
No, they outsourced it.
Which is very rare because they've never really done that before.
Actually, no, I was about to mention that. Actually, a lot of their games aren't actually made by the Pokemon Company. The Pokemon Company is mostly like
it's
a rights holder.
Game Freak developed the thing, but they own. I think it's like, what is it? 2/3 Game Freak or 2/3 Nintendo, 1/3 Game Freak. I can't remember what it is.
The Pokemon Company is the overarching entity.
Yes.
And yeah, the Game Freak used to make all the products, but I believe since even before Sword and Shield, Game Freak was never the sole developer anymore. Especially when they started transitioning to 3D.
Yeah, I think they definitely got outside help, but they were still the lead developer. But Game Freak didn't have anything to do with the Diamond and Pearl remakes, which they had a very interesting design choice that definitely split the fan base a little bit. It was that like chibi kind of design, which not everybody likes. I didn't.
Well, they were trying to recapture the DS kind of attitude towards it.
I played a little bit of it. I didn't care for it too much. I didn't actually get that far into it. And Gen 4 was actually a pretty good game. Like to play Diamond or Pearl or Platinum on the DS or 3DS. Still a fun time. I think should be more so than the remake.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Platinum. I don't think I ever played Diamond or Pearl. I think I just played Platinum.
I mean, if you play Platinum, you played Diamond and Pearl.
Yeah. But what I mean is that actually, I think my favorite would have been in terms of mechanics, as you know, not mechanics, sorry, in terms of like atmosphere. It's like Heart Gold, Soul Silver.
Yes.
I feel like that really captured the essence of classic Pokemon. In a way, no other game has really done, in my view.
No, still to this day, I still think, for me personally, it is the best Pokemon game and will never be beaten. But that's, I think, for a variety of different reasons. One, Pokemon Go was my first Pokemon game, so it's heavily nostalgic to play that game again with updated visuals and new Pokemon added, all the rest of it. But I think it's just I feel like it's a lot more simple in its plot. Both Red and Blue and Gold and Silver were. I mean, Red and Blue was like, here's Gary, he's a dick. And here's Team Rocket, they're dicks. Like, you're just gonna fight your way. Whoever's in front of you, you don't care. You're just gonna send out your Charizard or Blastoise. No one picked Venusaur. And
which is a shame. Venusaur is actually really good.
It was good for the first two gyms in particular. That's for sure. Actually, it was good for Giovanni too, because he mainly had.
Yeah, no, he runs through the entire game pretty well, and a lot of his abilities are really good against the champion as well.
I think the speedrunners all use Blastoise though, don't they? Or Nidoking. Actually, that's right. They pick Squirtle originally, and then they go to Nidoking because you can get the.
It depends if it's a glitches run or not. They do different strats. Yeah,
glitches run. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I don't watch those because my brain.
There's some great videos of them reprogramming the game using glitches. It's quite a bit of fun.
There was a YouTube channel I think called Son of a Glitch a while back. They used to show off a shit ton of Pokemon glitches, and they were all like insane and crazy. And he would also just like show how to do them, and some of them were so like input specific that it was really, really interesting to watch because it's just like on this frame you need to press this combination of buttons, and if you don't get it, you just need to reset 40 times until you do. And it's just like, I'll just watch you do it. It's fine. I don't need to.
I'm glad for the glitches because that's the only way you can catch Mew without being given it in the original games.
Do you remember all the rumors when we were kids? Like, if you did like specific button combinations, or like when the SSN is leaving and there's like that box, and Mew's apparently in that box in the truck, and what else was it? There was a few other things as well because it was just an event Pokemon, right? Only in Japan, I think. I could be wrong.
No, they did it. They did it in Australia as well.
They did. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, they was at EB and Kmart or something. It was at shopping centers.
Toys R Us? Was it Toys R Us? Do you remember Toys R Us?
Yeah, I remember. It might have been Toys R Us as well. I remember I missed out on it because I completely forgot about it. But like, yeah, it was shopping centers. They would have these little, sort of like the old roadshow that Sega used to do. They go around to different places to show off Pokemon, and it was very effective in getting people on board, especially because the kids could just play for free and stay there for hours. It was good. The kids good for parents to leave their kids there while they went off shopping or something. And then the event stuff for Pokemon, like that went on until what?
Gen 5, I think.
Black and White, right? Yeah.
Black and White 2, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, they did the event. They did the online event stuff for the 3DS games, but that's a bit different.
Yeah, I think so. I think once they get X and Y, they transitioned out of it. But you can still buy event cartridges and stuff like that on eBay from like stores that didn't necessarily throw them out because they're meant to either send them back to Nintendo or dispose of them. But I mean, who's going to do that, right? So some people still have the event cartridges, and you can. Some of them are like locked to specific times, but you can set the time on the cartridge, on the system, and you can still dish out. And if someone else has another DS or Game Boy Advance, you can still send a new Pokemon from those cartridges, which is super interesting.
I'm smelling another side business.
Yeah, I somehow feel like that would be an incredibly niche. Incredibly niche business.
You'd be surprised how many people care about getting it from the original source rather than a glitch.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. But in any case, any final thoughts before we wrap up Stepladder Repairman Joey?
I feel like we barely covered the breadth of Pokemon. We only really talked around it a lot. There's so much about like the mechanics, how the multimedia stuff really got people engaged with the world of Pokemon, and how people still think about Pokemon as a real place, like the world of Pokemon, and the way people have grown up with it, and that they've shared it with their children.
Why do you think it took off the way it did versus something like, Dragon Quest, which from my understanding, a lot of the early Pokemon designs were inspired quite heavily from
Yes, you
the
can see a
franchise.
one-to-one in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you think,
Um,
like, obviously Dragon Quest is very successful in its own right, but nowhere near in terms of the scale that Pokemon have achieved?
I suspect it's mostly due to the fact that the cartoon came out here first, and they sowed the ground because it was popular. Pokemon Monsters was popular in Japan, but did not really take off there until it took off in the rest of the world. And I think you could tie it directly to the cartoon and not just the cartoon, but the merchandise that came along with the cartoon, the music, the
Mm.
toys, the comics. People forget there was a comic as well. Um,
I
a
think the
lot of
trading
that
cards
stuff,
really helped as well.
and the trading cards as well. There were trading cards almost from the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, like one of the first spin-off games was the Pokemon trading card game
That is
on the
still
Game Boy.
one of my favorite games, and the soundtrack for that is an absolute banger. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it. It is wonderful.
I haven't heard it in a while, but I have played that game. It is pretty good.
There was
Although
a
I think the
trading
sequel
card.
is better.
Yeah, there's a fan translation of it. Now,
There is.
because I
I
think
played
it
it.
was only, yeah, I started playing it. I didn't finish it because I get distracted super
Me
easy.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. um, but yeah,
There's always something else to do.
you know what's interesting about the what you're saying before about it's definitely still popular in Japan, but not as popular potentially. I think they have quite a well, they had more variety available to them at the time when Pokemon first launched. But even up until very recently, when you went to Japan and you were looking at repurchasing old Pokemon games, they were a lot cheaper up until very recently when obviously there's been quite a lot of tourist influx into Japan recently with the yen struggling a little bit, and a lot of people visiting and going to pick up these sorts of things. When I was there last time, the prices of the Pokemon games in Japan have tripled for the vintage stuff.
That's not
Triple,
it's not surprising, but also a good sign of the popularity.
yeah, tripled in about 18 months. But what I did notice about going to a lot of the video game stores this time around is there's a lot more foreigners, myself included, in those stores versus when we went together, right? I felt like there's a lot less people engaging with the Japanese collectibles in particular, which is interesting. So
Yeah. Yeah. There wasn't that many people when we went. That's right.
but
Even in the touristy areas. Now I think about it,
yeah,
except for the robot restaurant, but that's a whole other thing.
yeah, it's gone.
I know.
It's very sad. But they were meant to be doing another one that wasn't
Oh.
necessarily that because when I was there last time a few months ago in Shinjuku, where it was, they still had the advertisement up for it, like the big wall. Do you remember that wall that had the big
Yeah.
restaurant? Yeah, that's still there. So, but the restaurant's gone. So I don't know what they're doing, but
I mean, calling it a restaurant's a stretch, but yeah.
Death Trap with a show was more accurate actually.
Oh man,
was,
those seats are uncomfortable.
it was a wonderful show. I had no idea
Oh
what
yeah,
was
no.
going on, but I loved every second of it.
I am so glad we did an experience, and on our what first night too. So that was
Was
yeah,
it
that was
actually?
definitely yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, but yeah, but they're not directly related to Pokemon, although there were actually some things similar to it. So about that. The yeah, with Pokemon, there's a lot of the uh, sentimentality is very strong, I think, and the nostalgia for what were like the classic Pokemon, especially. Um, and a lot of the growth of Pokemon, as just a brand in general, as much to do with the multimedia facet of it, which is a lot how a lot of brands, oh, sorry, not brands, a lot of intellectual properties in Japan start out as. There's in outside of Japan, this is more the trend now, but especially in the 90s, you would never just have one thing. You would have a comic, and you'd probably have a game or a TV show, or a radio show, or an audio.
Absolutely. Well, no, I was going to say, well, I think that's a good note to stop on. We are 35 minutes in, and yes, Yeah. Cheaper and more accessible than Game Gear at the time as well. Well, yeah. But we can talk about that in another episode in the future. I think we should revisit some, well, just some of the old Sega stuff. I think is always very interesting to look at. But in any case, thank you very much for joining me today, Joey. Same time again next week, everyone. Let me know if you've made it this far in the video, which, you know, it's been a long episode, so we'll see. But if you have any thoughts on Pokemon, leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, we'll see you again same time next week.